Well, hello class, welcome to week 7. Can you believe it? We are 2 weeks away from the end of class. I hope that you would be able to say that your class is just, your learning has been, this class has been filled with learning. How about that? Over the past 6 weeks. I know we've kind of just fire hosed you with a lot of information, videos and readings and articles and books and you name it. You have probably spent a considerable amount of time in the content over the week. So I wanted to do a couple things. We have a number of things that are due this week. Okay, so if you look at the syllabus, you will see that this week in week 7, we have the quiz, we have the OB experience paper that is due, at least according to the syllabus, due the end of this week, though we'll talk about that in a little bit. We've got some other things to pay attention to. We're reading from chapters 12 and 13 from Nahavandi, and then we're in chapter 7 of Duhigg, and looks like about 9 pages or so out of Boa. Okay, so talking about leadership and organizational power and politics. So no matter what sort of an organization you are involved in or have been involved with or in, there is always going to be, for good or for ill, organizational power and politics. If any of you knew Dr. Gary LeMaster, who spent a number of years here at APU, actually one of my, I guess I would say my mentors, my former supervisors, former professors. In fact, he taught me this class. He was always talking about, from his 40 years or so of experience, maybe even more than that, about the reality of power and politics within organizations. So whether it's Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, or even churches, right? So government organizations or NGOs, they're always going to have power and politics. And then this crazy reality that Target knows what you want even before you do or I do or we do, based upon habits that they see, and the power of algorithms and kind of data mining is pretty fascinating and mind-blowing, and also at the same time a little bit scary and freaky, right? So, okay, so we've got lots to do this week. A couple things to make mention of, and I want to actually spend some time talking about this assignment that's due and remind you of what's coming up in the remainder of our time together. The first thing is that I was talking with a student and a mistake was caught, so I want to make sure that I am faithful to what the content is and give the, give time needed as needed, depending on where you saw things. So if you look in the syllabus, it says that the organizational behavior experience paper is due at the end of this week. Okay, so in Canvas itself, based upon the fact that this course used to be a 9-week class, it's now an 8-week class, we neglected, my apologies, to update the due date for the OB experience paper. Okay, so in some sections of Canvas, it still says that it's due at the end of week 8 or unit 8, which in a 9-week class was the second to last class of the term, but in an 8-week class, week 8 is the end. So here's what I'm going to do. And I hesitate to do this a little bit because if I know that when I give extra time, sometimes it can dip into other assignments. I don't want to do that, but I do want to make sure that I'm faithful to what some of the content areas in Canvas say. So your organizational behavior experience paper is due at the end of this week, but like a credit card payment, it's due on a certain date, but it's accepted until another certain date. Okay, so it's due at the end of this week, Sunday at midnight, but I will accept it without any penalty up until the end of the term, okay, which technically the end of the term is Friday, okay, of next week, okay, at midnight, okay. So I'm gonna talk about some other dates, but just keep that in mind. So although it's due Sunday at midnight, I will accept it for another 5 days up through the Friday night at midnight, okay, which is technically the 29th of June, okay. But remember, you also have your response paper to the habit, right? So, and that's due at the end of the term as well. And then you have your organizational design PowerPoint presentation, along with the 8th quiz, your journal entry, and so forth. There's a lot of content still due between now and the end of the term. So make sure you pace yourself in doing that so that you don't get kind of overwhelmed in the last couple of days of the term and you're unable to complete everything properly, or I would even say maybe you don't perform as well as you would have liked in those final assignments, okay? So that's really important, so pace yourself in that. I want to talk about this org behavior experience paper, okay? I've gotten some questions on that, so if you look in the syllabus, you can clearly see that it says the students will write a 7 to 10 page paper, not including your cover page or references page, discussing a real-life example of an experience that they've had with one or more of the elements of the organizational behavior that are examined in Havandi et al. Text. Discuss any and all short or long-term effects incurred by the organization. Okay, so students must provide a thorough recap of the specific situation, detailed information, and so forth. Okay, so some of the questions I've received is, where do I start with this? How do I pull all these things together? I said, similar to the aforementioned statement of the organizational design project assignment description, all organizational behavior related theories and or practice in the course will not have been explored prior to the due date, so students will more than likely need to read ahead in the main text for a better understanding of the content. Okay, so maybe for some of you, stress is a big deal. Okay, but I want you to think about a stressor in an organization, and maybe stress isn't, so this idea of managing stress that we've looked at, maybe that's not the main issue. Right? Maybe the main issue is that because of the stress that's being managed, it's caused for conflict. Okay? Or maybe working in teams is what caused for stress, which is what then created conflict, but organizationally, all of those kind of elements create a culture within the organization. Or maybe there's a lack of cultural competence, I guess you could say, and so that causes for conflict. And if we go back to what I had originally said, if organizational behavior is understanding why we do what we do, so there's always got to kind of be a purpose or a rationale or a reason behind why we're acting certain ways, that may explain why there's conflict. Okay, so you have lived your experiences. Okay, I can't speak for you. I've not had your experiences. You've had your own, right? But if you have questions, I'm more than happy to kind of respond either via email. We can talk on the phone. And I think one of the things that is helpful, especially as I had a conversation with one of your classmates earlier today, kind of teasing out what's there. Asking specific questions, kind of digging deeper into certain areas and saying, hey, I'm hearing you say this. I think we could probably camp out here for a bit and talk about that specific content. Okay, so think, I would say, broadly and yet specifically, right? So start kind of this a funnel, get big, all of the organizational realities that you experience, and then work your way down to something more narrow. And don't neglect how they all kind of connect, right? So I think if we're looking at organizational behavior, if we pluralize that, organizational behaviors, oftentimes one thing creates another. I like to use the example, especially in our program, you can take potentially a class on working in teams, right? So working in groups, there's group and conflict, right? So oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier, it's the groups and the teamwork that cause for conflict, right? It's the group and the teamwork that cause for stress, or it's the group and the teamwork, you could say then, that causes conflict, which causes stress, which infects and affects culture, as I mentioned, okay? So don't think of things in kind of siloed isolation. Look at the bigger, broader picture of how specific, narrower things actually impact and infect and affect the larger experience that you're having organizationally. Okay, so as I mentioned to other students, if you have questions, feel free to write, call, email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and I'm happy to help you kind of say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Am I going in the right direction? And I'm happy to say yes, no, maybe. Let's explore that a little bit more together and see if we can come to some better results. Okay, so hope that's helpful. I think that just having conversations sometimes, thinking about things, writing even an email and saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. As you get those words out in your email correspondence, that could actually be very helpful. To help you articulate and think through things. And in fact, some of these realities that you're going to potentially write about, there's probably things that are staying with you. They've kind of stayed on you, and you're thinking about them. They're affecting you in some maybe negative ways. Writing about them can actually be a bit cathartic, and it can be helpful in working through that process. And if I can be of service as you write this paper and think about this, I'm happy to do that. Okay. So remember, due at the end of this week, but I'll take it through the end of the actual term, which is Friday, the 29th of June at midnight. Okay. So hope that's helpful. Any questions, concerns, comments, anything else you need to contribute? You have all the same content, discussions, and all that going on this week. Let me know how I can help you. You're doing a great job. I'm so impressed. This has been a pretty phenomenal term for me to read all the things that you're thinking and instructing kind of as we create, like I said, this spread of an amazing meal to share together. So thanks for partaking in that and really adding to and making this experience wonderful. Hope you're having a great week so far, and I look forward to seeing you online in this week 7.